There was something about Kong that set him apart from the other bullies Mu had faced years ago, when he was just 15 and starting to excel in boxing. His sister had become a promising rookie ballerina, and as her only family, Kong supported her in every way he could, mentally, emotionally, and in any other way possible. Everything was going well until she caught the attention of a creepy stalker. As the man's obsession grew worse with each passing day, he eventually lost control and crossed a line. He secretly followed her, and when she turned into a quiet alley, he decided to make his move to carry out his sinister intentions. Fortunately, Kong happened to be nearby and saw what was happening. Before the stalker could harm his sister, Kong jumped in and, with a surprise attack, managed to stop him before any damage was done. The police were called, and the stalker was arrested, but because Kong had intervened before anything illegal occurred, there wasn't enough evidence to punish him properly. The man was released not long after, but his obsession had now reached a dangerous peak, turning into madness mixed with a thirst for revenge. Before long, the stalker found the girl again, this time in another secluded spot, but now he had brought a kitchen knife, clearly planning something much more sinister. However, Kong showed up once again, seemingly out of nowhere, and stopped the crime. But this time, he wasn't fast enough. His sister's leg was badly injured, shattering her future as a ballerina like a swan with broken wings. Kong blamed the law for failing to protect her and decided from that day on that he couldn't trust it anymore. Instead, he vowed to do whatever he thought was right. His first act was to beat that creepy man within an inch of his life, but that was just the beginning. Kong resolved to handle what the law couldn't. Whenever he came across a suspicious gang or someone about to bully or harm others for no reason, Kong would step in. He'd give them a warning, not with words, but with a not-so-gentle move. Fate had turned Kong into an anti-bully vigilante. He saw fighting not as violence, but as judgment. Thus, the reason he came after Mu wasn't much different. Back in the present, Mu stood there, accepting Kang's preemptive punch without resistance. Even though he was hit by a surprise attack from behind, a blow that could have easily knocked him out, Mu quickly realized it was just a light punch, nothing like the heavy blows he was used to. As a first strike, he couldn't help but wonder if Kong just wanted to test his reflexes or if the punch was meant as some kind of warning. Either way, Mu didn't care. All he needed was confirmation to start the fight, and now he had it. As usual, Mu felt a thrill about being in another fight, completely unaware that this opponent wouldn't be as easy as the others. Kong, however, didn't rush to officially begin the fight. He hesitated, surprised that Mu wasn't running around beating people up for fun as he had been told. Kong had no idea that it was all a lie made up by Hyung to impress him. Mu, on the other hand, had no interest in explaining himself or clearing up the misunderstanding. He casually ignored Kang's questions and told him to stop wasting time with small talk and just do something already. That hit a nerve with Kong, only reinforcing his belief in Hyung's story and convincing him that Mu really was as crazy as he'd heard. Kong did exactly what Mu asked. He dashed forward and started trying to beat him up without wasting any time. Mu, however, stayed on guard, preparing to defend himself like a professional boxer. Kong didn't hold back, throwing punch after punch, but surprisingly, Mu dodged every single one. With each dodge, Mu's confidence grew bit by bit. Seeing this, Kong quickly realized that his opponent was not just all talk like other bullies, he actually knew a thing or two about fighting. So, Kong decided to step it up a notch and use one of his boxing tricks. He threw a light right punch to block Mu's vision, planning to catch him off guard and land a heavy strike using the opening. But to Kang's surprise, Mu had already anticipated the move and blocked it too. For Kong, though, this was just a warm-up. It felt like he had found the perfect punching bag to practice on. He started throwing punches again, but this time Mu could clearly feel the difference in power compared to the earlier strikes. As expected from a champion boxer, Kong used his skills and experience to maintain relentless pressure, refusing to give Mu even a moment to catch his breath. Punch after punch came at him, powerful and unyielding. Mu found himself completely cornered, unable to do much in response. Kong relentlessly targeted Mu's weak spots, making it nearly impossible for him to focus on the fight. Things worsened when Kong found an opening and landed a bone-crushing punch to Mu's side. The pain hit him instantly. It felt like getting kicked in the groin twice in a row. Kong backed off momentarily, allowing Mu to deal with the sharp pain in his side, but not without making a point. He coldly remarked that he was intentionally going after Mu's weak and injured areas because, in his judgment, unworthy people didn't deserve mercy. Instead of feeling scared, impressed, or even angry, Mu, still grappling with his pain, started laughing. This unexpected reaction threw Kong off for a moment but ultimately irritated him. He couldn't believe Mu's response, which only fueled his fury and made him even more ruthless. Meanwhile, Mu had already recognized the vast gap between Kang's strength and his own. It was painfully clear that this guy was on a completely different level. With Li's body, Mu knew he couldn't match Kang in raw power. However, as someone obsessed with fighting, giving up wasn't an option. Admitting defeat went against his nature. Facing a stronger opponent who didn't fight fair, Mu realized he'd have to adapt and play by the same rules. He just needed to stay focused, sharp, and wait for the right opening. Drawing on thousands of years of battle experience, he recalled a past fight that felt eerily similar to his current situation. It was one of those rare encounters where Mu was nearly overpowered. Even during those painful moments, he never regretted fighting. He always felt a strange satisfaction from the thrill of it. But back then, it wasn't just about enjoying the fight or the pain. Mu wanted to win at all costs, so he forced himself to calm down, momentarily shutting off all his emotions. The creepy grin faded from his bruised face as he began to carefully analyze his opponent's movements. When another punch was about to come straight for his face, Mu made a move. Using his dirty, torn cloak, he distracted Kang just enough to create an opening for himself. The more Mu thought and utilized his tiny bird-sized brain, the smarter and more dangerous he became. In a previous battle, he had managed to capitalize on a similar opening and landed several direct hits on a giant monster he was fighting. To his disappointment, however, those attacks didn't seem to have much effect. That creature was on a whole different level. Despite knowing he was outmatched, Mu didn't stop. He kept using his small brain to find openings while keeping his emotions in check, refusing to give in or give up. He was defeated that day but somehow managed to survive. Even in those agonizing moments, he couldn't help but enjoy the thrill of slipping through the chaos. The situation now wasn't much different, so Mu decided to employ the same strategy, shutting down his emotions and using his brain to try and win. If that didn't work, well, at least he could enjoy getting beaten up. His first move was to shut off his emotions and adopt a sullen expression. However, since he had no idea how Li's face would look after suppressing his feelings, he forced himself to improvise for the time being. This new expression, combined with his already unattractive features, irritated Kang more than ever. It pushed Kang to the peak of his anger, making him think Mu was mocking him on purpose. Determined to finish things with his raw power, Kang charged at Mu. Mu, on the other hand, acted as if he were just fooling around, pretending to be completely unaware of Kang's approach. As Kang moved forward, throwing punches wildly, Mu stepped back, dodging the attacks as best he could. It didn't take long before his back hit a tree, making him realize he needed to change tactics. Suddenly, an idea hit him. He dug his foot into the ground and, with a quick motion, kicked up dirt as fast as he could. Some of it managed to hit Kang's face, but since Kang was wearing protective glasses and quickly shielded his face with his hands, it didn't do much damage. Instead, it only reinforced Kang's suspicion that Mu was a criminal who deserved a beating. All of a sudden, Mu lowered his head, causing Kang to hesitate for a moment, but it was all an act. Mu smirked and taunted him, asking if he had stopped attacking because he was scared. The jab hit its mark, sending Kang's temper skyrocketing and providing him all the motivation he needed to keep going. Without hesitation, Kang launched another attack, but Mu, with his goofy-looking face, was surprisingly ready this time and dodged the punch with ease. Kang wasn't about to let him off the hook so easily, though. With a sudden move, he appeared behind Mu, trying to attack from his blind spot. Once again, Mu managed to dodge, but this time Kang's fist grazed Mu's chin, causing a bit of damage. However, it was nothing Mu cared about. He was convinced his plan was working. Kang couldn't focus like before. It didn't take long for Mu to notice one of the biggest differences between Kang and the other two opponents he had fought earlier. Kang's fighting style was far more aggressive. Unlike their defensive approach, Kang's aggression, fueled by Mu's mocking behavior, made his moves predictable and easier to block with minimal effort. The ground was key to this difference, and that also explained the real purpose behind throwing dirt earlier, not to actually hit Kang's protected face, but to scatter dirt and small rocks, creating obstacles that made it harder for Kang to move freely. Everything was falling into place according to Mu's plan. After struggling to keep up and getting beaten earlier, Mu was now managing to dodge Kang's attacks again. But dodging wasn't his ultimate goal. He was trying to force Kang to move around recklessly, increasing the chances of him stepping on the scattered dirt and small rocks, eventually losing his balance. Soon, Mu got exactly what he was waiting for. Kang stepped on a small rock, lost his focus, and provided Mu with the perfect opening. Wasting no time, Mu jumped into action, knowing he couldn't afford to miss this chance to turn the fight in his favor. He aimed for a vital spot, but midair, he realized his arm wasn't responding, probably from all the strikes he had blocked earlier. Still, he didn't let that stop him and used his elbow instead, landing a heavy blow. For a moment, Mu wondered why his arm had suddenly stopped working and forced him to use his elbow, but it didn't matter much. The elbow strike turned out to be much stronger than any punch he could have thrown. Kang's glasses shattered, leaving him stunned and completely caught off guard. Naturally, Mu couldn't resist seizing the moment to get under Kang's skin again. He started mocking him, throwing insults and making fun of how easily he had been hit. But then things took a turn. So caught up in planning his next move and taunting Kang, Mu failed to notice what was happening in the moment. While Mu was busy with his mocking, Kang had used his weapon to crush Mu's leg. The unbearable pain hit Mu almost immediately, and he dropped to his knees, stunned, unable to believe what had just happened. Standing tall now, Kang rested his weapon on his shoulder, smirking. It was his turn to mock Mu. "What's the matter? Want to laugh and mess around now, or is this not so funny anymore?" Kang had had enough of Mu. No one had ever annoyed him like this before. In his anger, he decided to break Mu's jaw, ensuring he would never laugh again. Mu remained on his knees, unable to move even an inch to dodge or defend himself. Just before the blow landed, he realized something: he had lost. As he closed his eyes, bracing for the hit, his thoughts drifted to the possibility of tasting failure again after nearly 4,000 years. Kang was ready to remind him of that bitter moment, but just a split second before Kang's strike could crush Mu's head, something, a piece of rock, perhaps, came flying out of nowhere and hit Kang directly in the face. The sudden impact made Kang stumble, and the object rolled away into the trees. Whatever it was, it stopped Kang's attack and saved Mu. Now distracted, Kang quickly looked around, trying to figure out who had thrown it. Things escalated further when he heard a faint, weak voice calling out, "Master," and approaching. Kang's instincts kicked in. As someone who took pride in hunting bullies from the shadows, he couldn't risk being seen. Without wasting any time, he grabbed his sweatshirt, threw it on, pulled the hood over his head, and dashed away before anyone could see his face. As soon as Kang disappeared, a small creature that looked like a monster appeared from behind, trembling as it called out, "Master." Mu turned to see who was calling him, and to his surprise, it was a small lizard-like creature with horns. Recognizing it immediately as the creature he had once raised to a dragon and made worthy of being his assistant, Mu was taken aback by how different it looked now. With no one else around to cause trouble, Mu and the dragonling headed back to Li's house. Once they settled in, the dragonling began explaining everything about Mu's current situation in the god's realm and his own story, how he ended up on Earth with this body. According to him, after his defeat against Lucifer, the dark entity had found Mu's godly body and trapped it in an unbreakable, impenetrable barrier that separated time and space. This made it impossible for Mu's soul to return to his body. To ensure no one interfered with his plans, Lucifer took Mu's body to his own domain, where he kept a close watch over it, a satisfied smile always on his face, knowing that without his body, Mu couldn't do much against him. However, there was one small problem: Lucifer couldn't easily enter Earth to finish him off. The only way for him to do so was to convince the dragonling to reveal how he could access or enter Mu's planet. Lucifer also brought the defeated dragon to his domain, promising him that if he cooperated and helped him reach Earth to eliminate Mu, he would make the dragon the new god of Earth in Mu's place. Confident that this offer would tempt Mu's assistant into betrayal for a chance at power, Lucifer awaited a response. However, the dragonling didn't give a clear answer. Instead, he whispered something so quietly that Lucifer couldn't make out what he was saying. Annoyed, Lucifer demanded that he speak louder, at least enough for him to hear. Finally, the dragonling spoke up, but instead of answering directly, he pointed at the barrier surrounding Mu. He asked Lucifer if the barrier, which could block time and space, could also prevent attacks from passing through it. Assuming the dragonling was asking out of concern for Mu, Lucifer confidently assured him that no attack could harm or penetrate the barrier. He even emphasized its invincibility and urged the dragonling to give up and consider joining his side instead. Then something strange happened. Lucifer noticed the surroundings starting to brighten. Suspicious, he turned to see what was happening, and what he saw made him freeze. The dragonling's injured body was glowing with a golden light, crackling with energy. At first, Lucifer was shocked, trying to figure out what the dragonling was planning, but his shock quickly turned to fear when the dragonling suddenly shouted, "Massive self-explosion." In that moment, before Lucifer could react, the roof of his castle, the very place he used as the base to control his domain, was completely shattered. In the next second, his entire castle was obliterated, disappearing as if struck by a nuclear bomb. Yet that wasn't even the craziest part. The explosion was so massive that it burned an entire side of the god's realm to ashes. The dragonling had used 99% of his strength for that explosion, and as a result, he reverted to his smallest, weakest form, a tiny lizard covered in smoke and dust. He did his best to escape before Lucifer realized what had happened. Knowing there was nowhere safe for him anymore, the poor lizard had only one option: to return to his master on Earth. But Lucifer wasn't about to let him escape that easily. Emerging from the dust, furious and feeling betrayed, Lucifer stormed after him, clearly angry enough to turn the lizard into stew for what he saw as an abuse of his kindness. The dragonling sprinted as fast as he could, desperate to stay out of Lucifer's reach. But before he could make it, Lucifer summoned a magical spear and hurled it at him with all his might. The little dragonling, now missing part of his tail, was only a few meters away from Mu's throne and the gateway to Earth. Despite everything, the magical spear missed him, and he managed to leap onto Mu's throne, then onto the miniature Earth surface, vanishing from the godly domain and reappearing in Earth's sky, completely drained of energy. The poor assistant didn't even care where or how he would land. He simply closed his eyes and let fate decide for him. As it turned out, fate had chosen him to be the savior of his master. The object that had hit Kang's face earlier, stopping him from landing the final blow, was none other than this tiny, exhausted lizard. After hearing the dragonling's explanation of everything that had happened, Mu fell deep into thought. His now small assistant couldn't help but wonder if something was wrong, but as expected, Mu wasn't sad. He was furious enough at Lucifer that if he ever got the chance to return to his original body, he wouldn't let Lucifer live another second. Suddenly, Mu's expression shifted from anger to excitement as he realized he finally had a chance to fight Lucifer again, a proper all-out battle. Even his assistant, the little dragonling, was startled by how quickly Mu's attitude and emotions could change. Mu sprang out of Li's bed, buzzing with excitement and finding a renewed purpose to keep going. Deep down, however, he knew he stood no chance against Lucifer in this body. His only option was to work harder and make Li's body stronger. Unfortunately, Li's weak, battered body was in such poor shape that even throwing a light punch in the air felt like everything was breaking. Mu couldn't help but wish this new body could heal faster. Then it hit him: he had told the dragonling to find a magical orb for him the last time they met. Turning to the small lizard, he asked almost hopelessly if there was any chance he had brought it back to Earth. To his surprise, the dragonling claimed he had indeed brought the magical orb, though he didn't have a pocket or bag to carry it. Instead, the little lizard had been hiding the orb deep in his stomach. At Mu's request, he slowly began to cough it up, struggling a bit since the orb was larger than the lizard itself. Once he finally delivered it, the dragonling explained that it was a dragon blood stone infused with a one-time healing spell. The little lizard apologized for only bringing one, saying he had been in a hurry and couldn't carry more. Mu wasted no time waiting for his assistant's saliva to dry. He immediately picked it up to examine it closely. As soon as he held it in his hand, he thanked the dragonling, telling him that this orb would be more than enough for now. Without hesitation, Mu activated the orb, releasing its healing effect, which caused it to shrink in size. Moments later, Mu's body was surrounded by a green aura radiating from the orb, and his wounds began to heal instantly. But that wasn't even the best part. Mu suddenly noticed something surprising: the orb's effect wasn't limited to healing. He could feel his muscles becoming more responsive, almost sensitive in a way they hadn't been before. There was only one explanation: the orb must have also been infused with a body enhancement spell, which was visibly improving Li's weak body. Noticing Mu's impressed reaction, the dragonling proudly admitted that he had personally put effort into it, infusing his own magic into the dragon blood stone. Mu appreciated this as he stared at the leftover remains of the orb, realizing that since it was used on a weak human body, not all of its power had been consumed, which explained the leftover fragment. He handed it to the little lizard, giving him permission to use it for himself. However, the dragonling didn't want to waste it on himself. Instead, he decided to store it for Mu to use later in case of an emergency. Just like before, he carefully pushed it back to its resting place deep inside his stomach. The scene then shifted to a rare yellow lizard on the other side of the city. Surprisingly, it was the favorite pet of the girl from earlier. She didn't see it as just an animal, it was one of her closest friends. She even wished her pet could talk so they would never get bored. Not long after, she stopped playfully teasing her lizard and returned it to its cozy home. She needed to head out, likely to school, and since pets weren't allowed there, she had to leave it behind to live its own life for a while. Peace returned to her home as she attempted to leave, but that day at school was no different. Everything seemed calm and peaceful, no one was bossing others around or causing trouble. Even the beaten-up bully from before was quietly sitting at his desk, now wearing glasses and fully focused on his studies. The pain he endured after facing Mu had knocked some sense into him, and instead of wasting his time, he was now preparing for exams, determined to turn things around. Everything was fine until Mu decided to make one of his usual over-the-top dramatic entrances into the classroom. The moment he walked in, he spotted the beaten-up guy and, without hesitation, asked if he wanted to go for another round of fighting. It wasn't clear if Mu was just messing with him or being completely serious, but before he could get an answer, the president of the student council appeared behind him, acting surprised to see that Lee had actually decided to show up at school after being absent for so long. Mu, with a little lizard crawling under his shirt and causing a slight commotion, casually replied that he was only there because she had convinced him earlier. He added that the only reason he came was to look for someone to fight and beat to a pulp. His intimidating expression and choice of words made the girl wonder what kind of chaos he was planning to stir up this time. However, since there didn't seem to be any immediate signs of trouble, she simply wished him good luck. Half of the day passed without anything exciting happening to make Mu's day interesting. On the floor below his class, two students were chatting about recent events at school. Those two happened to be Kong and a girl from his class. Since he always seemed so clueless about what was going on, the girl was filling Kong in about a second-year student who had recently been humiliated. She explained the details with a bit of gossip flair while Kong listened with mild curiosity, still trying to piece together what had been happening around him. As the school day came to an end, Kong and the girl began walking toward the exit, with her eagerly explaining everything she had heard. According to the rumors, the nerdy guy who used to get bullied all the time had turned the tables on his tormentor one day. He beat the bully so badly that the guy lost consciousness and had to be rushed to the hospital. If that wasn't shocking enough, the nerd had supposedly ripped off the bully's ear in a wild move, earning him the nickname Neutered. At first, Kong had no idea that she was talking about Lee as she described the incident, especially Hyung's appearance and his ripped-off ear, along with Mu's suspicious behavior. But quickly, Kong pieced it all together. There was a high chance that the nerdy guy she was talking about and Lee were the same person. It suddenly hit Kong. Hyung's crocodile tears and his entire act of pretending to be a victim had been a ploy to manipulate him into taking action. However, since it was all in the past and there was nothing he could do about it now, Kong decided to let it go, at least for the time being. On his way back home, Kong didn't realize he was taking the same path as Mu. Meanwhile, Mu was feeling disappointed and frustrated that his day had turned out to be so dull. Everyone at school had been too busy scribbling in their notebooks or on their phones, and there hadn't been a single invitation to fight or even a hint of one. Just as Mu was about to sink further into hopelessness, something caught his eye. It was Kong, awkwardly walking and looking visibly embarrassed as he chatted with a female friend. Since Kong was wearing glasses and a mask to hide his face, Mu didn't recognize him right away. However, something about him felt oddly familiar. His hair color, height, and build seemed similar, but it was the muscle size and form that sparked Mu's suspicion. In just a second, that suspicion turned into certainty. He completely lost control and shouted, "It's that guy from yesterday." His loud voice and sudden outburst caught Kang's attention. Kong turned his head, and the moment he did, he saw Mu charging toward him with a crazed look on his face. Without thinking twice, Kong bolted, running as fast as he could and leaving his shocked friend behind. As Kong sprinted away, he couldn't help but wonder how Mu had recognized him. He was sure that the expensive mask and glasses he had bought were enough to conceal his identity. So why was this lunatic chasing after him? Kong couldn't come up with an answer, but he knew one thing for sure: he couldn't let himself get caught. The last thing he wanted was for this crazy guy to report him to the police or something equally disastrous. Desperate to escape, Kong decided to make an unpredictable move. He spotted an alley up ahead and, without hesitation, veered off his path, jumping straight into it in hopes of losing Mu. Mu kept chasing after him, determined not to let Kong get away so easily. But as he turned into the alley, Kong was nowhere to be found. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. Mu had been looking forward to using this perfect chance to fight Kong, but his hopes were crushed when he realized he was gone. The dragonling popped out of Mu's shirt, asking if that was the same guy who had dared to challenge his lord yesterday. Wanting to help his god track down the rude human, the little lizard requested permission to sniff him out using the strong male scent he had picked up when Kong hit him the day before. Mu gave him the green light, and the dragonling immediately sprang into action, sniffing around like a well-trained puppy. Just as Mu's assistant was fully committing to his new role, someone suddenly appeared right in front of him, stopping him in his tracks. Luckily avoiding being stomped on, the little lizard tilted his head up to see who it was. To his surprise, it wasn't Kong at all, but the president of Lee's class. She stood there, stunned, staring at him with wide eyes. Her shock didn't last long, though. It quickly shifted to a delighted blush as she looked at the adorable little lizard. Clearly, it was her first time seeing something so cute, and she couldn't help but be intrigued.